Okay, today we're going to be learning about suspensions, not the horrible type of suspension that means you're not allowed to come to school. This is a type of suspension that is in chemistry or in science. What we've got here is a mixture of sawdust and water, and it looks pretty gross. It looks a bit like a molasses mixture, someone said before, which is correct, yeah, pretty good. There's bits floating in it, so it hasn't all disappeared into the water. That's why it's all murky and muddy. So anything that's murky or muddy we call a suspension. So when you put something in water and it doesn't dissolve. And there's two ways we can separate mixtures. Have any of you guys ever helped with doing, say, the peas or the potatoes for dinner? Quite a few of you. Right, so you do it in a pot of water, cook them for a while, and then how do you separate those two things together?
You drain the water?
You drain the water. Well, draining the water is actually a thing that we call decanting. And I'm going to sort of show it to you in a slightly different way. So imagining that this is my pot, okay? And imagining that there's some potatoes or peas or carrots in the bottom of it. Decanting is literally just carefully pouring the liquid off the top, leaving the other stuff behind. If I try to do that with this mixture here, this sawdust mixture, it's not going to work. Can anyone guess why? It's all mixed. Yeah, I could leave it to see I'm being very careful.
It's floating on top.
It's floating on top. Cool. So decanting works really well if the other stuff sinks on the bottom, but it doesn't work if it floats on top. It's actually a really good separating method. And what we often do in science is we put a stirring rod across the top of a beaker to do decanting. Again, imagining that, say, there's something heavy in there that sinks in the bottom, like maybe some stones or bits of metal, and we can actually pour the water down our stirring rod and it actually sticks to the stirring rod. See? And that's quite a cool little technique that we can do in science. So that's called decanting, but decanting's only useful sometimes. Actually none of you will have given blood, you're too young to at the moment, which is a shame. But if you ever give blood, they need to separate the blood into separate things, and this method won't work either. Mud. Blood is a suspension. It's made up of things called red blood cells, white blood cells, plasma, which is basically like water with other stuff in it, so it's a solution, that bit, and some other bits and pieces. Well, they don't want all of that blood sometimes, they just want bits of it for when people have car crashes or surgery or something like that. And so what they do is they spin it really, really, really fast to separate it. And the red blood cells go to the bottom and the plasma goes to the top. And that's called centrifuge, and it's something that I'll get you to do some research on as part of your homework tonight. Okay, really what today is about is this one here. So I'm just going to turn the camera a little bit and hopefully that gets all of this. Has that got that in? Nearly? I'll lower this because this doesn't need to be so high. Okay, what we're going to focus on today, whoopsie, is filtration. Alright, so that's one. Turn the wrong one. That's smart. Okay, we're going to focus on a thing called filtration. Filtration requires a filter. This is actually how your vacuum cleaners work. They suck in the air, and then the filter, a bit of paper, stuff like this, in your vacuum cleaner catches all the dust and lets the air through, and then the air comes out the back without all the dust and all the grimy stuff on it. Then the filters often have to be replaced every couple of months. Well, this is exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to try and separate this using a filter. So you'll see my bit of filter paper has been folded in half once and then scored, so I press it really hard. Then I fold it in half again, so it's a little wedge like that, and I fold it again. Now I can open it up and it makes a little cone. Everyone see the little cone there?
Yep.
Okay. And the cone goes into a funnel. So you remember learning about funnels at the start of the year? This is the best use of a funnel. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get this horrible water to look like that water. So it's like tap water, which is what it was made from. Now, this is too big for me to put my stirring rod over the top, so I'm just going to very carefully hold my filter open and pour some sawdust in. And I've got to make sure I don't go too high or it flows over the top. But if we have a look, the drips coming through are clear. So they're probably water. Now I wouldn't want to drink that water because it's actually had sawdust in it. So the sawdust might have had bacteria and other stuff like that in it. So it's not actually going to be clean to drink, but it would be clean enough to cook with because that boils it and makes it sterile. So some of these things I've just talked about are going to give you some hints for today's work. So what do you have to do today? One is you have to be able to describe using a diagram what decanting is. And you might need to do some research for that. You're going to have to describe what filtering is, and I'll go through how you can draw this in a moment. You have to then say which method is the best for separating, and that includes looking at centrifuge, so you might have to do some research tonight. So you have to decide which method is best, why is it the best, is it always the best method? Like we wouldn't filter red blood because most of the parts are too small to go and they'll go through filter paper. Right, having a look at what we've got here, we're starting to get some sawdust collected in the filter paper. We call that the residue. The liquid coming through, which is the water with some other stuff dissolved out of it from the sawdust, this is called our filtrate, and this is usually the thing that we do want. All right. We've got a suspension, of course, that's been poured into it, and in here we've got our filter paper and our funnel. All right. So this is how we do filtering. This is the main focus for today. All right, Harry, I'll get you to stop the video, please.